Hello and welcome to the World Today, everyone. I'm Richard Nta in Nairobi. Let's begin with our top story. And we begin with the developing news out of Japan, where an earthquake with a revised magnitude of 7.5 has jolted the northeastern coast of the country. Tsunami waves have been observed off Iwate and Omori prefectures in the Pacific Ocean. Kuji Port in Iwate recorded an 80 cm wave. No abnormalities have been reported so far at nuclear plants in the affected prefectures of Omori and Miyagi, and no issues have been identified at the Fukushima Daiichi and Daini nuclear plants, according to their operators. The Japan Meteorological Agency had earlier warned of a tsunami as high as 3 meters in Iwate and part of Hokkaido. The quake measured an upper 5 on Japan's seismic intensity scale, strong enough to make it difficult for people to move around. Bullet trains from Tokyo to Omori have been suspended. Iran's foreign ministry has said there is no plan in place for a second round of negotiations with Washington. During a press conference, a ministry spokesperson stressed that while the U.S. claims diplomacy, its actions in no way reflect a genuine pursuit of it. Iran has vowed retaliation after the U.S. seized an Iranian-flagged cargo ship near the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. Central Command says the ship was attempting to bypass a U.S. blockade and failed to comply with repeated warnings. Iran's press TV reports that Tehran has denounced the move as armed maritime piracy. The 2-week ceasefire between the two sides is set to expire on Wednesday. Walter Morris reports from Washington, D.C.
Sunday, the White House confirmed Vice President J.D. Vance would lead the U.S. delegation, along with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. The marathon negotiations between the U.S. and Iran broke down over Iran's nuclear program. Sunday, Trump wrote on Truth Social that the U.S. is offering a fair and reasonable deal to end the war. He also repeated previous threats to target Iranian infrastructure, saying the U.S. will, quote, knock out every single power plant and bridge if Tehran doesn't agree to terms. Some military law experts say that could be a potential war crime. In an interview with Fox News, the U.S. Energy Secretary defended the president's statements.
The president's using every way he can to get leverage over the regime to bring this conflict to an end. He's a creative negotiator. He uses pressure in different ways. He uses uncertainty in different ways. And I think, as you've seen over the last 16 months, it generally leads to good results. I don't think we'll see any surprises here. I think we'll have a nice end to this conflict.
The ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran is set to end Wednesday. This weekend, Iran closed the waterway again and fired on ships trying to get through. Then Sunday, Trump said the U.S. Navy has seized an Iranian cargo ship in the Gulf of Oman. Iran's Joint Military Command says the strait will remain under strict control of the armed forces as long as the U.S. blockade stays in place. According to reports from British military officials, Revolutionary Guard gunboats opened fire on a tanker and a projectile hit another container vessel Saturday. The strait has effectively been closed since the start of the conflict, leading to a global energy crisis. Last week, Trump imposed a blockade on Iranian ships coming through the strait in retaliation. And in a separate social media post Sunday, Trump said the U.S. Navy fired on an Iranian cargo ship and Marines took custody of the vessel. U.S. Central Command says 23 Iranian ships have been sent back since the U.S. blockade began. Walter Moore, CGTN, Washington.
Our correspondent Sepa Saremi has been covering that press conference. He joins us live via Zoom from Tehran. Sepa Saremi, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us here on The World Today. Give us the highlights from the press conference. Does this mean no peace talks according to Iran? What do we know?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I just coming back from the press conference in Iran's foreign ministry. He addressed different issues, very key. He had key statements, but here are the main highlights you need to know. As you mentioned, first he talked about negotiation. He said that despite the fact that diplomatic efforts aimed at ending the war have been taking place in the past 7 or 8 days, but no decision has been made on the next round of negotiations, and there is currently no fixed plan for the next round. As I said, the spokesperson said also that while the United States publicly insists on diplomacy and its readiness for talks, its actions don't really reflect its intention on the diplomacy and negotiation. As you know, just last night, U.S. naval forces attacked an Iranian vessel near the Strait of Hormuz. And referring to United Nations terminology and definitions, he said that Iran considers a naval blockade on its ports as an act of aggression. On the timelines, he said that, because as you mentioned, the ceasefire will expire on Wednesday. He said Iran don't really pay attention to timelines and ultimatums or expiration of ceasefire. What matters to Iranian officials is Iran's national interest. At the beginning of the presser, there was a picture of a boy who was killed in an attack in South Iran in a school, and he also talked about that boy that was killed in U.S.-Israeli strikes. What really stood out to me was that I didn't see anything different compared to previous rounds of negotiations. If the negotiations happen, I asked him this question. If I asked personally, raised this question, I said, what concessions is Iran willing to make if the negotiations happen in Islamabad? For example, I said, is it possible that Iran negotiates missile program? And he was surprised. He told me that how do you even ask this question? We never negotiate our defense capabilities. So many analysts and many people are asking what will be different in the second round of negotiations, even if they happen.
All right, Ehsan Sepasaremi, I beg your pardon. Important point that you brought up there. You touched on earlier about the naval blockade. Iran has also vowed retaliation over the attack on its vessel that was returning from China. Tell us more about this. What do we know?
Of course, regarding the military reaction, military retaliation, such decisions are not made inside the foreign ministry or the government. Such decisions, especially during the war and now the ceasefire, mostly are determined inside the military circles of Iran's political establishment. It means IRGC and the supreme leader himself. So about the retaliation, I haven't heard any official confirmation of how they're going to retaliate. Yes, they have said they're going to retaliate, but how, when, will be determined by IRGC and the supreme leader, not foreign ministry, not the president. Because as you also witnessed, Iran's delegation was headed by Ghalibaf, the Speaker of the Parliament, not foreign minister, not president. So I think we are going through a very, very difficult and different time in Iran's politics.
Let's talk more about that difficult and different time. Well, the current ceasefire is due to expire on Wednesday. What is the mood on the ground in Iran?
Of course, the spokesperson of the foreign ministry also mentioned that the ceasefire has been breached by U.S. several times. He said first, we had mentioned that the ceasefire in Lebanon should also be a part of ceasefire between Iran and the U.S. But as everyone witnessed, Israel breached and attacked several times Lebanon. And second, he also mentioned that during the ceasefire, U.S. started imposing a naval blockade on Iran. And just last night, U.S. attacked Iranian vessel near the Strait of Hormuz. He said several times U.S. has breached the ceasefire, and as many analysts, many experts that I talked to here predicted that this ceasefire would be very, very fragile. And we have to see what will happen, because I believe that next 48 hours will be very important. We will witness a second round of talks or war.
All right, Sepasaremi, we will be following the next 48 hours closely. Sepasaremi speaking to us from Tehran. Thanks for that. Meanwhile, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian says his country is acting in self-defense, and U.S. President Donald Trump has no authority to deny Iran's nuclear rights. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf added that Iran is prepared for both diplomatic and military responses to the current situation.
We did not initiate the war. We did not attack anyone, nor do we currently intend to attack anyone. We are only fighting for our rights, but they are trying, through bullying, to deny the rights of a nation, of a society. They say they have decided that we cannot exercise these rights. Why? What crime have we committed, and who are you to decide?
ما اینجا به هر حال آتش بس اونجا برقرار شد ناقص. یعنی اگر ما A ceasefire agreement was reached earlier, but it was incomplete. As I have made clear, if they fail to implement the ceasefire deal, we will not abide by it either. That means hostilities will resume, and at the same time, negotiations will be suspended.
China has expressed concern over the forced interception of an Iranian-flagged cargo ship by the U.S., urging relevant parties to abide by the ceasefire agreement.
Now that a window of peace has opened, favorable conditions should be created for ending the war as soon as possible. China supports the relevant parties in maintaining the momentum of the ceasefire and negotiations and will continue in the spirit of the four-point proposition by President Xi Jinping to help ease the situation and play a constructive role in ultimately achieving lasting peace and stability in the Middle East.
Authorities in the U.S. state of Louisiana are investigating a mass shooting that has left 8 children dead. Police have identified the gunman as Shamar Elkins, who was killed in a shootout with police. 7 out of the 8 children killed were his own. CNN's Jen Sullivan has the details.
A horrific tragedy rocking the community of Shreveport, Louisiana. A series of shootings Sunday leaving 8 children dead.
7 of the 8 children that were killed we do believe to be his children.
Police say the shooting rampage began just after 6 a.m. Sunday. Victims were found in 3 homes. The suspect carjacked a vehicle and led police on a chase.
It rattles the entire city. This is something that, when something like this, it affects us all.
The shooter was killed in a shootout with police.
This is nothing but pure evil. Over 30% of our crimes and 30% of our murders in the city of Shreveport are domestic in relation. Now that number has gone up.
There have been at least 114 mass shootings in the United States so far this year, according to the Gun Violence Archive, and this marks the deadliest shooting in 2 years. U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, who represents the Shreveport area, released a statement saying, quote, "We're holding the victims, their families and loved ones, and our Shreveport community close in our thoughts and prayers during this incredibly difficult time." I'm Jen Sullivan reporting.
Well, that is it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thanks for watching. Fresh fighting reported in the eastern DR Congo despite progress in Geneva peace talks. We take you to Sudan, where the Red Cross says thousands have gone missing in the 3 years of fighting. And we'll tell you about a revolutionary handheld tuberculosis screening device in South Africa. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's begin with our top story, and we start off in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where fresh fighting has been reported between the army and the M23 rebels in the east. This comes despite commitments by the two sides after talks ended in Geneva on Friday. Congo River Alliance M23 spokesperson Lawrence Kanyuka accused government forces of carrying out indiscriminate drone attacks. This comes after the DRC and the AFC M23 announced in a joint statement Sunday that they had reached an agreement to facilitate humanitarian aid deliveries and release prisoners within 10 days. Well, let's bring in our correspondent Chris Ochemringa joining us live from Kinshasa. Chris, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. First and foremost, reports of fresh fighting in the east with the Rebel Alliance accusing the government of conducting drone attacks. What more can you tell us about this?
Yes, Richard, a security official I spoke to said that fighting is ongoing in South Kivu province, an area known as Minembwe, and North Kivu province as well, an area known as Masisi. And they're saying that this fighting has led to the loss of lives of a number of civilians. They didn't give the number, the death toll, but they're saying quite a number of civilians have been killed. On Sunday, we heard the spokesperson of the M23 rebel group saying that the government has been carrying out drone strikes in some of the densely populated areas, killing civilians in violation of these agreement that they signed in Switzerland just a day earlier. And the DRC government, the DRC authorities on their side are saying that it's the M23 and the Rwandan army that started, attacking their positions. And so it's the usual back and forth that has been going on throughout this conflict. Both sides accusing each other of attacking first, violating the ceasefire, and, killing civilians. What we have heard from a leader of the Wazalendo militia that is fighting alongside the Congolese government, saying that they are fighting a just war. He's saying that their country has been invaded. There are Rwandan troops in Congo, more than 6,000 of them, and that has been documented by the United Nations group of experts. And they're saying they're fighting to protect their territory. They're saying this is something that is recognized internationally, the responsibility to protect. They're saying that, so they're saying that they're determined to continue fighting until these foreign forces leave their territory. They've said also that they respect the diplomatic measures that President Tshisekedi is carrying out with the United States and Qatar, but they will continue fighting until their land is free from all these forces that are in eastern DRC. Richard?
Further to that, Chris, this is coming just hours after the rival sides and the U.S. said there is progress in Geneva peace talks amid an agreement not to target civilians or humanitarian aid convoys. Is this progress in talks making any difference on the ground? And what's next in the peace process, would you say?
Well, there's very little progress that has been made on the ground because what we have seen is that there has been a kind of a lull in the fighting ever since the United States and Qatar called for these talks by the two sides. But there's still pockets of insecurity. The Wazalendo militiamen, Congolese forces, and M23 are still fighting in areas of South Kivu and North Kivu. So we have not seen a total ceasefire respected by both sides. And like I said earlier, they keep accusing each other of violating the ceasefire. And there's also been rhetoric coming from different leaders that is really undermining the peace process. Recently, the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, said that they will not withdraw their troops from from Eastern DRC, what they call lifting their defensive measures, and that really led to a lot of controversy in the DRC. They were saying, you see, this is clear that the president of Rwanda doesn't want to respect what he signed in Washington, D.C. The DRC government says they are going to respect the agreement. Last month, they said they have started hunting down the FDLR militia. This is a group that is blamed for carrying out the 1994 genocide that is based in Eastern DRC and has been fighting alongside the Congolese army. Rwanda says the withdrawal, the neutralization of that group is a very key condition for their withdrawal from Eastern DRC. So there's a total lack of trust between the two sides. The United States, Qatar, the African Union are all pushing the two warring parties to the negotiating table, but it's clear that they do not trust each other, and so it's going to be very difficult for peace, real peace, to be realized in the next few days. I mean, we still have a long way to go for peace to be restored in Eastern DRC. Richard?
Chris Ochomoringa speaking to us live from Kinshasa. Thank you for keeping us up to date with the very latest. Let's turn to Sudan, where the Red Cross charity organization says at least 8,000 people have gone missing since the outbreak of conflict 3 years ago. The UN says thousands of families are still waiting for news of their loved ones. But with the conflict still raging, access to relevant information remains extremely difficult. CGTN's David Mbithi with that report.
Mohammed Jaffa operates a motorcycle taxi in the city of Port Sudan, which at some point has been serving as the nation's de facto capital amid the ongoing civil war. At his age, Jaffa is too old to be enlisted in the fighting, but one of his sons joined the front line on the side of Sudan's National Army. However, Jafar received news of his son's capture by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces more than a year ago. The ensuing silence on his son's status has been eating away at his family.
We lost all contact with him. The memory of my son haunts me every day. Even his mother left the house a year ago because she couldn't bear to stay after his disappearance. And his brothers also left because they were all affected by his disappearance. I've been living alone here for over a year now. I've been living here alone for 13 months. His disappearance has affected me deeply. Every time I see him in a dream, it's as if he came to the house and I met him there.
Sadly, Mohammed's tribulations are shared by many families across the war-torn country, which has for a long while been described as the world's worst displacement crisis by the UN. Recently, the International Committee of the Red Cross revealed that thousands have gone missing since the start of the conflict in April 2023. The brutal war between Sudan's army and the RSF reached another grim milestone earlier this month, dragging the fighting into its fourth year.
Since the beginning of the conflict, we have recorded approximately 8,000 missing persons cases. If we go back to the pre-conflict figures, the total number of cases recorded by the ICRC is around 11,000. However, this number is small compared to the reality on the ground.
The International Committee of the Red Cross says it's been running a hotline to receive requests and calls from families searching for their missing sons. In some cases, those efforts have paid off. Red Crescent societies in the wider region, including in Chad and South Sudan, facilitated more than 560,000 contact tracing phone calls in 2025 alone. But the fate of thousands more remains unknown for now. David Mbidi, CGTN.
And in West Africa, Togo says it is ready to serve as a bridge between the Alliance of Sahel states and the wider regional and international community. This follows a high-level summit in its capital Lomé on Saturday, which brought together representatives of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, as well as officials from the Economic Community of West African States and the UN. The meeting focused on strengthening regional cooperation and redefining strategic approaches to the Sahel. The three countries withdrew from ECOWAS in 2025 and formed their own alliance. They also broke away from defense cooperation with Western nations like France and the U.S.
La nouvelle stratégie du Togo pour le Sahel.
The new Togo strategy for the Sahel is not merely a policy document, but an open hand and a formal framework for cooperation. Togo says it is ready to put its mediation expertise and its regional standing at the service of stability in order to act as a bridge between the Sahel and the wider international community.
I believe that when reading the 5 pillars of the strategy, we immediately understand that you have the right perspective, one that all partners should adopt regarding the Sahel. And what is this perspective? It is first and foremost to place at the center the capacity of the Sahelian people to build a space of freedom for themselves as long as they are given the opportunity and the means to do so.
Time now for a short break. We shall reset and return with more Africa Live. Here's what's ahead. Coming up, we'll tell you about a revolutionary handheld tuberculosis screening device in South Africa. Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Researchers at the University of Pretoria have developed a groundbreaking handheld device that could potentially transform how tuberculosis is detected. The device eliminates the need for sputum samples and lab processing, tackling one of the biggest bottlenecks in TB diagnosis. Traditional tests can take weeks, delaying treatment and increasing the risk of transmission. CGTN's Julie Shire has more.
TB remains one of the world's deadliest infectious diseases. In 2024, it killed over 1.2 million people worldwide. Early detection is critical to treatment and limiting transmission. Yet the same slow testing method has been used for over 100 years.
And what that typically entails is a patient coughing up a lung mucus or a sputum sample. And then that has to go be transported to a lab. And then that gets decontaminated in a biosafety level lab, and then that would typically either go for culture or into a nucleic acid-based assay, and that can take anywhere from a few days to 6 weeks to give a result.
Researchers at the University of Pretoria have found a simpler alternative using just a single drop of blood with a mycolate antibody real-time immunoassay or MART portable device.
You don't have to cough up this infectious sample because you're literally putting bacterial particles into the air when a patient has to cough up. So you put the other patients at risk, you put the healthcare workers at risk. In the blood sample, we look for an antibody. It's really interesting because the antibody indicates that your immune system is busy fighting an active infection.
MART removes the need for lab processing, delivering results during a single doctor's visit.
This is the handheld device. It fits in the palm of your hand. You would simply switch it on and remove the cartridge from its packaging, insert the cartridge into the slots in the device. It does the first activation, do the second activation, then you prick your finger, touch to the cartridge, and it will give you results in 30 minutes.
The breakthrough could be a game changer for South Africa, which carries one of the world's highest TB burdens, with over 50,000 deaths in 2024 alone.
20% of people die undiagnosed of TB while they were still living, and that is what needs to be curtailed. So this can now go out, and you can do a campaign in order to determine the hotspots of TB infection in South Africa. We know that they are in prisons and that they are in the mines where people need to be routinely surveyed for the presence of tuberculosis.
Beyond the health crisis, TB carries a heavy economic toll, costing billions in lost productivity and household income, underscoring the urgency of containing the disease. Marty could support the World Health Organization's global target to cut the number of cases and deaths by at least 80% by the end of the decade. But regulatory approvals and clinical trials are still required. While the device offers real hope, it may take years before it is rolled out across hospitals and clinics in South Africa. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town.
A new fashion institute in the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo is helping to nurture the next generation of creative designers in a region where high fashion is a way of life. It is equipping young people across Central Africa with skills to promote African designs and start their own businesses. CGTN's Chris Ochimringa has more from Kinshasa.
Gilles Kumpava is a young Congolese studying at the Regional Fashion Institute in Africa. He's among the first students who enrolled at this institute in Kinshasa that teaches young people to be innovative fashion designers.
J'ai vraiment bénéficié plein de choses.
I really benefited from this training program. I now understand tailoring and pattern making. I have become a professional.
The institute also has a cultural laboratory that promotes African fashion made from eco-friendly materials.
Kinshasa is considered the capital sub of fashion, but we import all the clothes we wear. We don't value our own culture. That's why I have decided to create unused fabrics and tell our story and elevate our customs. That's all thanks to the knowledge I acquired here.
The project, funded by France, seeks to train 200 young people by 2026 who will be capable of developing their own brands.
The program for investing in fashion with impact is funded by France, just like the IRMA project. It's free for young people across Central Africa. The first cohort, called the Band of 9, has already completed its training.
The students had an opportunity to showcase their designs at a fashion show in Kinshasa. They were joined on the runway by their more experienced colleagues, the Sapeurs, the Society of Tastemakers and Elegant People. They flaunted their designer brands in typical Congolese style. Even the guests and judges came dressed like the night was theirs to win.
It's a DNA for DRC people. You see what I mean? So a Congolese guy is when you see him, you see first what he's dressing. And it's very important for us because starting by the shoe, and today I'm wearing a Gucci shoe. So for me it's representing my value.
SAPE is an institution. We grew up watching our parents dress in bright colors, and we'll make sure to pass it on to the next generation. We are proud to have institutions like IRMA in Kinshasa that train the youth to go create real fashion and understand the elements of style.
The Sapeur movement is popular in the DRC and the Republic of Congo. It traces its roots to the colonial period. Congolese men working in France and Belgium adopted European fashion as a form of resistance to show they were equal. Some Sapeurs, like these ones holding a placard, have taken it to a whole new level, with a message in Lingala that reads, "Sell your land and use the money to buy clothes." For many of these Congolese, dressing in stylish clothes is more than just fashion. It's a tradition that stresses the importance of looking good in public. Many here feel they'll command little respect or go unnoticed if they dress simply at events. Chris Ochimringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Kenya is seeing a steady rise in Chinese affiliated enterprises, employing thousands of locals. But language barriers have often kept many out of higher paying roles. Now a growing number of Kenyan schools are nudging their students towards learning the Chinese language as a pathway to a broader spectrum of career opportunities. CGTN's Trix Ngado reports.
As ties between Nairobi and Beijing deepen, Chinese language learning is gaining momentum across the country.
What about if I have 9:40? What will be the time? GODN. Correct.
In Nairobi's Mukuru Kayaba, a budding education center based at the Burden Sharing Primary and Secondary School Center is equipping children with Mandarin skills, preparing them for a rapidly shifting job market. A love for the Chinese language is blossoming at the most unlikely of places here in Mukuru Kayaba, Nairobi, Kenya. This is not just about picking up a foreign language for some of these students, it's also about opening up future opportunities in business, cultural exchange and education. And the teachers here tell us enthusiasm has been remarkable. While challenging at first, the children soon get the hang of the language, with moments in these classrooms separating them from harsh realities back home. Most of these students hope to become translators or teachers themselves.
My first time in Chinese, it was a little bit challenging. It was hard. Sometimes I used to skip lessons, but for now I can't even skip any lesson at all. As per me, I can do anything. I can be a translator or I can be a teacher.
If you have reached not a very high level, for example level 3, you can be able to get a scholarship for your bachelor's in China. The other benefit of learning Chinese is you're able to get translation jobs and also interpretation jobs at various Chinese companies in our country.
The China Mashinani program collaborates with the Chinese Language Teachers Association of Kenya, which sends volunteer tutors to work with the learners. And so far, hundreds of local children have found their way into the job market after learning the Chinese language.
We have like 200 students from Form 4 that have gotten to the labor force, and they have been employed within industries that are handling products from China. Also, we thank Discovery, Kasha, and the Chinese Training Institution, because they are the people who have been sending us volunteers to come and train our children here.
The deputy chair of the Chinese Language Teachers Association of Kenya says learning the language years back expanded his horizons, connecting him to new cultures and professional networks.
Look at the way of delivering the education system. So we want to borrow from this. And now, because we are borrowing from this kind of thing, we also have to set our minds to that kind of developing economy. So teaching and learning Chinese language will only help us to gain more opportunities. One, we have also scholarships. Things like scholarships, China is offering so many scholarships to Kenya.
At the BDS Center, there are plans to expand with support from the Chinese community so as to bring these lessons to even more learners, opening doors to a brighter future. Trix Ingado, CGTN.
Welcome into our business segment. The governor of the Central Bank of Zimbabwe has said the ZiG currency is undervalued by almost half. He notes that although the currency is supported by foreign exchange reserves and gold, its market confidence remains fragile. John Musha argues that if all of the available international reserves were used to repurchase the currency in the market, it could be done at an exchange rate of around 15 per US dollar. This is as the ZiG is currently trading at approximately 25 to 28 per dollar. The Apex Bank governor acknowledges that the main challenge is restoring confidence among the public and businesses following Zimbabwe's past experiences of hyperinflation and currency failure. To date, more than 90% of domestic transactions still use the dollar, reflecting a lack of public confidence in the ZiG currency. Nearly a year after U.S. President Donald Trump imposed his controversial tariffs, which the Supreme Court struck down earlier this year, the White House is launching a major refund initiative for affected importers starting Monday. Analysts say the rollout raises new questions about global trade impacts and the mechanics of reimbursement. Mitch McCann reports from New York.
This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, American history.
It was, without question, one of the most controversial days of President Trump's second term, dubbed Liberation Day, an attempt to impose sweeping tariffs on the international community.
Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years
A year on, the tariffs imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act were ruled unlawful by the US Supreme Court in a major blow to the president. The tariffs prompted businesses to rethink the way they operate, but the uncertainty of the trade policy has discouraged many from permanently moving manufacturing. Instead, some have shifted final assembly to countries like Vietnam to avoid higher tariffs, while components themselves are still made in China.
With the trade policy having been as uncertain and mercurial as it has been, companies have been somewhat disincentivized to commit too heavily to moving manufacturing because that's a very significant multi-year high-dollar investment.
The court's ruling has seen companies demand the levies back they paid to import from countries affected. But William George, who specialises in global shipping research, says the government is complicating this.
And there are a number of mechanisms that may be used to try to avoid this. And one of them is asking companies, did you actually eat the tariff or did you pass that cost on to the consumer? Because hypothetically, if the cost was passed on to the consumer and the White House paid back the tariff to the importer, then they would be double dipping. They'd be essentially being paid for the tariff that they had already imposed upon the U.S. consumer.
And while America's partners were facing steep costs to send their goods and services stateside, a number chose to enter into trade agreements to satisfy the White House. The future of those agreements, now that the tariffs have been ruled unlawful, remain up in the air.
I think it's going to be a choice that those countries are going to have to make. The tariffs President Trump instituted last year, despite being completely illegal, stayed in place for most of a year. If a country tears up their agreement with him, he will probably impose illegal tariffs on them again, which will eventually be struck down. But some countries don't want to wait for that, particularly if we go into a global downturn.
But despite President Trump's failure to win at the US Supreme Court, David Super from Georgetown University says it's unlikely to deter any future administration from making similar moves if it wanted.
I think a future president is likely to draw the conclusion that the Trump administration broke the law and the Constitution quite freely and paid very little price for it. Some of its actions were canceled, often after they'd had considerable effect, like the tariffs. Some of their actions weren't canceled at all, the illegal war in Iran being an example, because there was no one who had standing to get into court.
The White House still has other tariffs currently in place, for example, on steel and aluminum. David Super believes they are not on stronger legal ground than the tariffs that were ruled unlawful and expects those to be challenged too. Mitch McCann, CGTN, New York.
Namibia's Minister of International Relations and Trade, Selma Ashipala Musavyi, has concluded her 8-day official visit to China. In an interview with CGTN, she expressed gratitude for the soon-to-be implemented zero-tariff policy under the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. She says the policy presents significant opportunities for Namibia's value-added production and cross-border port trade.
Starting May the 1st of this year, China is going to implement zero tariff treatment to all 53 African countries with diplomatic ties. Of course, Namibia included. So what opportunities do you see when it comes to Namibia's exports and when it comes to value addition, as you just highlighted?
You know, first I need to express Namibia's thanks and appreciation to the government of the People's Republic of China, because I think the gesture from China to extend a zero-tariff measure regime to African countries is a direct product of the Forum of China-Africa Cooperation, FOCAC. So we are very happy about that, and we welcome that. How Namibia and other African countries, but let me confine this to Namibia, is going to benefit is manifold. First, it will build confidence between our two countries and also our two private sectors, because non-tariff measures are a confidence-building measure. Number two, I think it will generate industrialization and optimize it and enhance it in order for us to gain more access to the Chinese market. I think it will accelerate the industrialization process in our country and also Africa in general. For Namibia, we are a coastal state. All of our neighbors who do not have access to the sea depends on our port. So it means more businesses for the Walvis Bay port because the cargo has to go through our port. And I think it will be really a way of what Africa has been talking when we say the Africa we want. Yes, we are endowed with resources, but we do not want to remain a source of raw materials. We want to add value to our products, being it minerals or agricultural, so that we can become more relevant to the Chinese economy, but also to the global economy. So we are looking at it from that perspective, and I think it's a very welcome measure.
Let's dive into the world of motorbikes, and Zhang Zhui's homegrown success is an integral part of a world-class industry of some 100 billion yuan motorcycle manufacturing in Chongqing. Chongqing tops the nation in the annual output of motorcycles, accounting for 35% of the total, and the number is growing. Zhang Zhuang has more.
At the slow-thumping motorcycle park in the Chongqing high-tech zone, many young riders are using the professional track for cycling practice. Speeding around the circuit, they engage in spirited competitive racing.
As a motorcycle enthusiast, I hope to take part in domestic races and stand on the podium. As we all know, Zhang Zhui motorcycles claimed a championship on the international stage. That has drawn more attention to track development, reducing cases of street racing, speeding, or mountain runs.
This motorcycle park is right next to our factory. Our operations cover the entire chain from manufacturing to the showroom and sales. We run a beginner track for driver's license acquisition and safety training. We have built both an off-road circuit and a road racing track. This also includes our repair shops and customization workshops. Our goal is to replicate this model nationwide.
As a key industrial base in China, Chongqing has deep roots in mechanical manufacturing and industrialization. Its hilly terrain marked by numerous slopes and steep roads is also highly suitable for motorcycle mobility.
In 2025, the city's motorcycle production hit 7.857 million units, ranking first among all cities nationwide, an 18.1% year-on-year increase. Motorcycle exports reached 6.109 million units, accounting for more than one-third of the national total, also ranking first among all provinces and cities.
At present, Chongqing is home to 51 motorcycle assembly firms above the designated size, along with over 410 component suppliers also above that threshold. Together, they form an annual production capacity of over 20 million complete vehicles and 20 million engines.
Our signature model, the Qingfeng, weighs just 57 kilograms and offers high power, high torque, and rapid acceleration, ideal for the varied and challenging conditions of off-road riding. As of the end of 2025, our sales have surpassed 200,000 units, reaching over 50 countries and regions worldwide, and capturing more than 60% of the global electric off-road motorcycle niche market.
By 2027, the output value of Chongqing's motorcycle industry is projected to reach 140 billion yuan. Currently, 7 of the top 10 electric vehicle companies nationwide in terms of production and sales have established a presence in Chongqing, clear evidence that the city is accelerating its transition toward high-end electric and intelligent upgrades in its motorcycle sector. Zhang Shuang, CGTN, Chongqing.
And we're not done just yet. We've got your sports segment coming up. Here are the headlines. Coming up in sports, we hear from Boston Marathon champions John Corrier and Sharon Lokedi as they prepare to defend their titles on Monday. Well, welcome into Sport on Africa Live with me, Richard Nta. Let's get going with athletics. The world's finest marathon runners will line up in Boston this Monday for what will be the 130th edition of the oldest professional road race. John Correa and Sharon Lokedi were simply untouchable when they sealed a double for Kenya in Massachusetts last year. But can they achieve